Bang bang, welcome to Shooting the Shit with me, Ollie.
And me, Rich.
Let's shoot some shit. Rich, what shit needs shooting this week?
Okay. So something that caught my attention early on today was this new movement. It's titled #BringBackMac. So I'll provide some context to why they're saying #BringBackMac. So basically there's this competition or this grant that a learning company called Chegg, I believe. And basically they have this sort of competition where you could get Macklemore and Ryan Lewis to come to your school, do a talk, I suppose, perform some music. And also that what comes along with this is a $10,000 grant.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's
goes straight to the music department. It's helping, help educate those new performers, the creative types that are going to school. But basically,
what do they have to do to get this?
I'm not sure of what they have to do to get
sponsorship.
I suppose they basically just, it's a company that's supporting schools and whatnot, so I'm guessing they just put them.
They just put in an application.
They put an application, and if they win it, they get to see Ryan Lewis and Macklemore.
So what was it for? Particularly deprived schools?
I'm not sure. What caught my eyes is the uproar that's happened as a result of it. So basically, some oversensitive parents have basically sort of stood in the way of this, monumental opportunity for individuals to see. They were Grammy nominated, so they're up there.
And I don't know what value they'll have to the school as a whole giving a talk.
They're showing. Well, basically, the problem is that parents.
I don't know. What are they?
The parents have complained, and basically, some of them, a small number. So basically, this department, the school that won this award were called Niguel High School. It's in California. The parents have basically complained, saying that Macklemore, through their lyrics, they're sort of glamorizing and sort of promoting the use of drugs and misogyny.
The use of misogyny.
Yeah, well, not the use of misogyny. Use of drugs and misogyny.
Okay, I don't know. I've not really listened to much of that stuff. I've heard Thrift Shop.
To me, this is ridiculous because through some of the songs that they've got, they're actually talking about individuals coming back from drug use to sobriety and how difficult you is former drug user. Exactly. So to be honest, we're talking about the whole. Well, we're not talking about it now, but we are going to talk about it.
He's sober now?
He is sober now. Actually, no, he did say he was in a situation where he took some marijuana.
Oh no. A whole marijuana?
Not a whole marijuana, but probably
half a marijuana.
Half a marijuana. But basically, the whole American... the whole American dream and whatnot, the idea that you can make it and do whatever, if you put that effort in, you can get somewhere. Surely another part of it is also that whole, you're allowed to start over and whatnot. This individual here, Ryan Lewis and Macklemore, they've come from
individuals.
Macklemore has come from a situation where he was a drug user.
Yep.
He is now not a drug user.
Apart from the marijuanas.
And through his songs, he's talking about, the strife associated with the use of drugs. But now he's also talking about how he's trying to keep sober and stuff. Why is he not allowed to go perform in the school? And help, show individuals that that's not the life. Exactly.
Well, I think the real stupid thing of turning it down was losing out for, $10,000 for your music department.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, just for the sake of one evening of hosting Macklemore and Ryan Lewis.
It's ridiculous. But basically, since then, there's been a lot of petitions to try and, appeal to the administration. So one's by Sydney Freeman Salter, and that's on change.org, and they've got over 7,000 signees. And another one by Quinn
how many of those people do you think are actually from the area?
Probably not, because at the moment they're trending with the Bring Back Mac. It's all everywhere.
So it's all over the internet.
It's all over the internet. So it's probably a load of people that don't even...
Not people in the community, a lot of them.
Not even those individuals at the school, so I'm not sure it's actually going to get that much weighting.
I mean, how many people are even at this school?
That...
They're big schools, I guess.
Yeah, there must be quite a few. But I just wanted to bring it up.
Everything's bigger in America.
Yeah. But I just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was a bit interesting.
What are your feelings? Do you reckon...
I think he should have been able to... I think it's dumb, stupid, and they should have allowed him to do it. Like
them. There's two of them.
Them. Allow them.
Yeah.
Allow the two individuals to come to school and do what they, you know... They won that prize. Well, the school won the prize. Just accept it. Like, you're getting something for nothing.
This is true.
It's cutting off your face, your nose, to spite your face.
Is this a bit of a cynical way to advertise in schools, though? I mean, getting these people on board?
One would say so, probably, yeah.
I mean, I'm not quite necessarily questioning the sort of integrity of Macklemore and Ryan Lewis.
Yeah.
But, you know, would a record company allowing them to do this if it didn't think there was some sort of benefit, you know, taking time out doing this sort of promotion?
Yeah.
They probably have at least the blessing.
But is that not true to be said with any sort of thing? Like, everyone is out to get something, even if you're doing something nice, like...
Yeah, maybe.
So that point's a bit moot.
Well, not necessarily, because you've got to then question sort of what academic value there is, perhaps.
Well, I think...
But at the end of the day, like I said, $10,000, that's a good amount of money for a music department, I imagine, just to have free.
Exactly.
Just there is some more money for you.
Buying some equipment for the students.
Indeed.
And shit. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Let them all buy Macklemore and Ryan Lewis CDs. They don't buy CDs anymore, do they? It's all streaming now. Spotify.
Not download, that's wrong. Spotify. Stream it. Tidal, yeah. Exactly. To move on to something else that's probably more...
Yeah. More
relevant.
I guess.
Yeah. But hashtag bring back Mac. So yeah, another thing that I found pretty interesting, it's happened in recent weeks, is Ben Carson. I believe he's a potential presidential candidate.
Yeah, for the Republican
Party. So basically, in a recent interview, I believe it was on Fox News. I want to say that because, you know, they're normally
well researched.
Yeah. Basically, he sort of issued the sentiments that the Holocaust could have been prevented or greatly diminished if the Jews had guns.
Yeah, I read this a number of places. Time first saw it on there. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous. Yeah. Perhaps. And his whole argument is sort of like, look at our constitution and why the founding fathers did this and that, and it makes sense to keep hold of the guns because this is why we have them, to prevent against tyranny. If only they'd had a constitution sort of attitude.
But do you not think it's disrespectful to use something of that magnitude, of that, you know, individuals on that magnitude over 6 million, I think it is, Jews were killed due to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
How dare you compare a struggle of that magnitude to America, where, you know, individuals are going to schools and shooting each other just because you have bad legislation on the use of guns?
There is perhaps a middle ground there that could be reached.
Okay.
I mean, those are both sort of
polar
extremes, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, the availability of guns and the occurrence of these sorts of shootings in America is one extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, for a Western democracy, industrialized country, first world, I mean, it's fairly unprecedented amongst sort of its, you know, comparable countries, how many shootings they have. And then on the other end you have, you know, complete removal of, you know, liberties, but also life. Maybe somewhere there could be some sort of sensible control that gives you some of your rights, but, you know, not a complete free-for-all with kids shooting each other.
Exactly. Well, what annoys me about what Ben Carson has said is that he seems like a well-educated person.
He's like a neurosurgeon or something, isn't he? A brain surgeon, some shit.
But what I don't like how he sort of he over-exaggerates some points, you know, because like
he has to, because he's trying to appeal to sort of
to masses, I guess.
You know, a core voting bloc.
Yeah. So in a book that he's published called The Perfect Union, like what he said here is echoed in it again. Like he basically, the points that he makes is that through a combination of gun control and propaganda, that's what basically, you know, not prompted, but helped the Holocaust be as, you know.
What does he think happened? Because, I mean, it's stupid, because things like that did happen. There was like the Warsaw Uprising, that was, you know, all the occupied, let's not forget, the Third Reich, militarily, and the way it controlled its population, was pretty, you know, it was up there in both those sorts of regards. They were militarily defeating, pushing back the French.
Poland.
You know, Poland, England, eventually the Soviets.
What does he think?
There's a very small minority in what is an increasingly enormous,
well-regimented,
well-trained, well-equipped.
That's silly. Another thing that I found pretty interesting actually is,
I mean, the Warsaw Uprising, sorry to interrupt, but
that's fine.
I mean, that was enormous.
That
lasted like a couple of months, I think. Like 60-something days, maybe.
And most of those individuals were actually then were either killed or sent to a concentration camp.
So ultimately killed. And many of them were Jewish, and yes, it was an armed uprising. And you know, it was the largest uprising of a resistance group, I believe, but there was sort of, it was all over, but
at least they showed some, well, not what I'm trying to say is they showed some resistance there.
It's good in the circumstances that, you know, there were people willing to fight on from the inside, but
his whole point is kind of
the idea that it would be some sort of, it would overthrow the Third Reich and bring everything down is ridiculous. Really, I mean,
it's absurd. Well, basically,
and at what point as well in history were the Jews supposed to rise up in arms? Because the thing is, I think the sort of people he's trying to speak to, Ben Carson, when he's saying these things, the sort of people that have a fantasy in their head where the government is just going to start sending out troops in, you know, tanks and choppers and jeeps, whatever, all over the country and do some sort of takeover like that. But when, you know, governments, entities take control, it's usually more slow creep. They try to do it, sort of keep people maybe from seeing it or from understanding the full implications of the things that are happening, not putting out the relevant information, sort of not teaching people certain concepts and sort of what's going on.
Very.
I don't know, this idea that, you know, everyone would just in a society with guns be gung-ho and be able to overthrow. Don't get me wrong, you know, as the Middle East shows, you don't need necessarily better weapons than the American army to be tearing shit up. You know, ISIS is running rampant across large parts of the Middle East now, Syria and Iraq. There's war in, you know, Yemen. Lots of rebels, cheap guns, making it ungovernable. But the idea that you can overthrow the tyrants,
just kind of a bit,
it's probably better to try and nip it in the bud.
Exactly. Well, that's one thing that you could say is, like, you know, with slavery and stuff, linking it to that, what were the slaves supposed to, you know, fight to?
He's not suggesting that though.
No, I'm not saying that, but that's sort of how ridiculous what he's trying to say there with the Jews in Germany is. Like, when you're fighting against such a strong organisation,
well, I'm sure
it's next to impossible.
Slavery, many states or sort of counties in states, there was that fear, I'm sure, because, you know, the black population, the slave population was getting so large that in many areas they were starting to outnumber the white folk. So
that links onto another thing that Ben Carson said in his book as well, is saying like it should have been like apparent to the Jewish people, saying, oh, it doesn't matter how many of us they kill, basically, you know, there's probably more of us than them, so eventually we'll get them. And then he also goes on later on to reiterate that guns don't kill people. Sort of like, well, I think they do, mate.
One thing that I found quite distasteful, it was something he'd said on Facebook about gun control, as I believe he, quote, never saw a body with bullet holes that was more devastating than taking rights to arm ourselves away. That is an outrageous comment. I can't... To someone in this country, it's unfathomable.
Yeah.
Any of our politicians,
yeah,
saying something like that after a shooting.
To me, if taking away your
shooting, if you imagine the uproar there would be.
Taking away your right to own a gun, if it's going to protect individuals on a grand scale and stop children killing other children, you know, the future of our generation.
Well, again,
you know,
unfortunately,
I know I'm not American, so
I
can't.
You're not going to be able to take, you know, guns away that easy because of the Constitution. But I mean, there is, you know, there is a middle ground. I mean, you know, having more background, you know, not having arms shows, gun shows, basically, where people can buy weapons without a background check.
Mm-hmm. What you need to remember here as well, that in one sense, like, because I was looking at the history of gun control in Germany.
Okay.
And basically after, you know, the First World War, there was a lot of restrictions based on Germany, because obviously they caused a load of shit, you know. So basically they weren't allowed, guns weren't readily available after the First World War. Yeah,
no, they weren't really allowed to keep a military, were they? I don't think, under the sort of Versailles Treaty.
Yeah, exactly. So basically just before, it was a series of like getting tighter and tighter regulations. When Hitler took over, you know, he relaxed it to a certain extent, so more people were actually allowed to have guns, but then he did put stipulations on it with Jewish individuals weren't allowed to have it.
So what you're saying is basically, historically, it would be unlikely that Jewish people would have access to guns at all, because there were no guns prior to Hitler. Yeah.
There was a history of not, you know, guns not being accessible unless you were in a certain position.
Is this Wikipedia?
No. This was well-sourced information. Well-sourced. I didn't read Wikipedia. I used my...
You went to Wikipedia and you found the link.
No. I went to Huffington Post, and then I was looking at resistance movements going against what, you know, Ben Carson has been saying. And there was a load of, like, information about, you know, how Jewish individuals had gone against, you know, the Jews, the Germans, sorry, and sort of failed.
Well, yeah, again, Warsaw Uprising.
Yeah.
I believe sort of there's something like 16,000 dead, something like that.
Yeah.
16 to 20,000, I can't remember off the top of my head, but...
Scary to think that people could get away with that.
And many thousands of civilians.
Yeah.
I think they pretty much destroyed Warsaw.
I think he's forgetting about the individuals. There must have been German people who were against that, as you said, like other individuals that weren't even Jewish. So
I think all the countries under the Third Reich had, you know, resistance movements. Most of them.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there's another person from Fox News, you know, called Dr.
Ben Carson's not from Fox News.
Oh no, well, so basically there's an individual from Fox News that supports what Ben Carson was saying.
Is this a Keith?
Yeah, Dr. Keith Abloh.
Doctor? Was he a doctor?
He's a doctor. Apparently he's a psychiatrist and a member of the Fox News medical A-team. But basically, he admits that there was futility in the whole resistance of that mass force that was the German well, the Nazis. I'm not going to say just all Germans because they weren't all with that. But basically, he said that if Jews in Germany had more actively resisted the Nazi Party or the Nazis' regime and had diagnosed it as malignant and deadly cancer from the start, there would indeed have been a chance of the people of that country and the world to be moved by the actions.
Not entirely convinced by that.
No, but this individual, because he's basically apparently he was born a Jew, and he's spoken at the Anti-Defamation League, and also has read up about the Holocaust, believes that his views are correct. I'm not sure how that works, because anyone can read a book.
He wasn't really there. He's never had sort of confronted this situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know I hadn't ever thought about gun control in Germany before during the Nazis. I don't know, I'd not thought about it.
No.
But you're saying there weren't guns?
No. Well, there were guns, but it's pretty restrictive, obviously, because of, them causing shit to go down and the whole world to be in at war.
It wasn't just them, was it? It was a complicated issue. World War I.
Fair. Well, that's how it was. Like, they were, heavily reprimanded.
Reparations.
Yeah, exactly. But another thing that this Dr. Keith goes on to say is that it was a bad idea for any Jew to hand over a gun, to board a train, pass through a gate of a camp, do any work in such a camp, or not to crush the skull or scratch out the eyes of any Nazi that turned his back for 1 minute. I think this is like quite a well misinformed,
ignorant view to take, because he's not been in this situation. I mean, these people, I assume many of them wouldn't. I don't know if they'd know where they were headed.
No.
On these trains necessarily, or what was happening at these camps.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna go.
When they're there, they're sort of deprived of sleep.
Yeah.
They've got sort of lights on all the time and shit, and very little food, lots of work. They broke the spirit of these people.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, you've seen other Jewish individuals being killed. Like, if someone's telling you to go on a train, fair enough, you're going to be like, to me, if I was in that situation, I'd be scared and I'd just do what I'm told. Fair enough, it's not the best thing to do, but it's sort of like, you don't want to die. Like I'm saying at the beginning, you didn't know you were going to this camp to die, did you?
Many probably not. No, I don't know.
So you're going to go along with it, aren't you?
Around.
But you're going to go along with it. You're not going to resist because, you may have a family.
Yeah.
You resist, you and your family get killed. Or you get killed. You're not going to be there to be able to protect your family, are you?
No.
So sometimes the path to,
they just keep people weak and tired and afraid.
Yeah.
And break their spirits.
Ridiculous. I hope that guy does not become president.
It's not really up to us, sadly, is it?
Fair. Cool. Should we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I guess we've covered that adequately. I just think it's ridiculous, this idea that sort of a tiny minority in a large industrialised first world country conquering the rest of Europe, huge chunks of Europe, other first world developed industrialised countries, suggests that such a tiny minority could just,
destroy a well-oiled machine.
And I think he overestimates necessarily the sympathy of other countries at the time.
That's fair.
Possibly with his statement that it would, encourage people to revolt.
Well, that's the thing, like America, they wanted no part.
There was still colonialism at that time.
Yeah.
America, like you say, wasn't interested.
And to be honest, they're the ones that were most likely to be able to mount an effective force, I guess.
I mean, I believe our country had a policy of appeasement for a while, didn't it?
Yeah, they did.
We were sort of all not chummy necessarily, but sort of on okay terms with Adolf.
Yeah. Silly. Well, he's very misinformed if he's been doing his research into the Holocaust, obviously, isn't he?
Well, indeed.
Bloody
stick to your work on the medical A-team.
Exactly. Do you not think, to some extent, this came to me just now, like, through Ben Carson trying to obviously use this historic, situation to support his idea that, we shouldn't restrict guns, or I'm not saying we, but the Americans shouldn't restrict guns. He's kind of victim blaming, or victim shaming. He's shaming the Jewish individuals, for being killed for not having guns, or not using guns. He's basically questioning their...
placing some, responsibility on their heads, which I don't think's really deserved.
No.
For what is, one of the most horrific crimes against humanity ever committed.
Yeah.
The industrialised genocide of people. It was
absurd.
One of the most monstrous things that's occurred.
Yeah. I think he needs to, the next time, think a lot more carefully about some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth.
But the thing is, you've already got Fox News that speaks to a large number of, people on the right of American politics.
Yeah.
People lap this up. People who will vote Republican.
Yeah.
Not all of them at all, but there'll be sort of plenty will be mobilised by those sorts of...
Yeah. What individuals does he have against him in terms of, like, the Republican...
Well, there's Donald Trump, obviously.
Okay.
Jeb Bush.
Okay.
So Bush number 3, potentially. There's a load of others.
So in other words, there's a load of imbeciles.
There is a lady, I cannot remember her name.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to know.
I know she's doing quite well.
Yeah.
Donald Trump slagged her off at one point.
Okay. Cool. It's good to know that potentially we'll have an arsehole running the country that we deal with quite often.
Oh, we deal with a lot of countries with arseholes.
Fair point, bro. Cool, let's move on to the next thing.
Right you are.
Raven-Symoné.
Somewhat less serious, yeah.
Yeah.
Raven-Symoné. I didn't really know who it was before I sort of saw this.
She was in the show with Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby show.
The Cosby show.
Yeah.
That show with Bill Cosby.
Yeah, she's in that.
Didn't she do something on Disney as well?
Yeah, That's So Raven. I used to love that as a kid. That's So Raven.
I never watched that. I never had the Disney Channel as a kid.
Cool. Alright, sorry.
Fact for you.
Yeah. Well, basically, she's been on The View, which is like our version. Well, it's their version of Loose Women. If individuals haven't seen that, it's a load of older women with a couple of pieces of eye candy that talk about foolish things during the day that no one really cares about, but makes them feel very well entitled. Well, makes them feel a lot better about themselves.
Did you want to sound any more sort of chauvinistic there?
I apologise if I offended anyone. No. So yeah, basically, they were talking about...
It's women talking.
It's women talking.
Is what you're getting at about current affairs and entertainment.
That's what they normally do anyway. But anyway, they were talking about a study on people who make assumptions based on names. I think it's racial assumptions based on names.
Study by whom?
I'm not sure whom. Do you know whom?
I don't know whom. We've done...
I thought you'd know.
Slither of research.
Okay.
For this.
Well, basically, they were looking at racial. I think it's discrimination at work, and assumptions that you'd make.
I mean, presumably a university.
Probably. Jump to find out, Ollie.
I mean, you can always just look it up there on the old.
The laptop.
The laptop.
But basically, she went on to make a very inappropriate joke that was not.
The outcome of the study is basically, just to recap, that employers discriminate based on name. Certain type of names.
Well, what was the one that she mentioned? Watermelonina.
Well, I mean, mentioning that before putting it in the entire context, I don't think it's necessarily fair.
Okay. I
mean, they kick-started the section with many people probably have seen it as a popular YouTube video with loads of views. It was something like 50 most ghetto names or something like that.
Yeah.
And these
they were pretty funny.
Dudes have come up with all these ridiculous sort of stereotypically sort of African American sort of ghetto sounding names. I don't know how better else to describe it.
Okay, I found out.
Oh. Sure, things like Shaniquas and Shananes and...
Shanane.
And one of the ones was... Watermelondrea. So yeah, that then leads on to a comment.
That's actually linked into this study that I've... well, not study, this article that I'm looking at on CNN at the moment. So basically, yeah, they were talking... there's a new study about racial bias toward black-sounding names. So a UCLA researcher found...
Where's UCLA? Is that university?
You're making me do some mad research, bro. I should probably know this.
Well, I should probably know this as well, because I've also...
University of California, Los Angeles.
Right, cool.
That's where UCLA is. Cool. So basically, they've... oh, wow. So UCLA researchers have found people envisaged men with stereotypically...
CNN now.
No. This is actually pretty interesting. But basically, they found that people envisioned. That's the right word. That men with stereotypically black names are sort of bigger and more violent.
Sure. Okay. What does it give examples?
But I can imagine some. I can give you some, like DeMarcus. Deshaun, Tequan. I'm just making up names here, but anyway.
Are those real names? Do you know people?
Yeah, I've heard of someone called Tequan.
Tequan.
Yeah, I was going to name my child that. But you know, I probably won't because I don't want people to discriminate against them. But anyway, to the point.
The cultural appropriation.
That she made was that she wouldn't hire, people with those sort of names herself, which for a segment when you're talking about this whole people discriminate against individuals like this and making up these preconceived ideas, it's not really appropriate, is it?
Well, yeah, it is appropriate because you're debating about that concept, so I mean it's appropriate for her in that context to share ideas even if they're slightly silly. I mean what she sort of said specifically, I think, was it was not racist but discriminatory.
I personally think it's a bit racist as well.
Well, given the particular example she gave, because she said specifically, I am not about to hire you if your name is Watermelondrea.
That's ridiculous. She could be one of the most educated individuals.
Do you honestly think that was meant to be taken 100% seriously? I mean, because we know that's a joke name. Can you imagine if you were an employer and you received a CV with Watermelondrea
I'd want to meet
written on it?
I'd want to meet this individual and see what they look like. I just sort of do this little game as what your parents like.
What are you envisioning when you hear the name Watermelondrea?
I'm thinking of a young Caucasian lady with blonde hair, blue eyes, well educated from Harvard University.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. And I'm going to give that girl a very good opportunity to work in my business.
I would most definitely give an interview, I think.
Yeah, just to find out who they were.
Well, because that's a really
ridiculous
name.
Yeah,
that would make you want to read their CV.
It's a good tip, actually, isn't it?
What, change your name to ridiculous?
Just so you could get some applications. But this is one thing that Raven-Symoné annoys me because she comes out with some absolutely absurd stuff.
Her name's not a particularly common name.
And she's got an accent in the wrong place. And she's misused the accent, so... No.
Is she?
Yeah.
Is that accent supposed to be there?
No.
No, it's just a superfluous accent.
It is. So I've been informed from the interweb.
The internet's always right.
From someone who is opposed to her view.
Well, that's definitely, we can take that. Is it from a blog? They're always reliable.
I think that was also found on Huffington Post.
Fair enough.
That's my favourite source for information.
Only source?
No, I go on Complex magazine. BBC, MSM. Anyway, back to what you were saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to discriminate, I guess, on a name, that is ridiculous.
Yep. But
what do you think? Again, just returning to this absurd notion someone actually called that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you not think employers would think that was a piss take? I mean, this is probably deeply offensive to someone, but I mean...
No, when you've got individuals...
Specifically a name like Watermelon Andrea.
When you've got individuals called Apple
Uh-huh.
and Peaches...
Yeah.
No, because any name is like...
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying...
No, any name... You can name a child anything nowadays.
I'm not saying a traditionally African-American name, but I just mean something as ridiculous as the names they were coming out with.
I would...
Video, it would... she then repeated.
It would make me laugh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna lie.
You might assume that it was a joke application.
Yeah. I suppose, like... some people's first...
because no one is called that.
Yeah. One thing that's annoyed me now with this is that she's come out later and basically said about how sorry she is, and obviously, and saying about how she's had to face discrimination herself for the fact of her size, her colour, her name. So it's sort of like, think about it, like if you're going to come out with something, like if your viewpoint is that you don't like this discrimination, don't make a joke about it. Fair enough, it is a joke, or it's supposedly a joke based on this whole YouTube video, but don't backtrack now. You know, I always like people, like, even if you say something I don't agree with,
well, I don't,
but say it with, you know, what's the word that I'm looking for, have some conviction. Stick to your guns.
Well, she only apologised, I believe, when, you know, there was an enormous Twitter response, obviously. I believe her account got hacked as well. So
that's right. Have you heard about the other stuff that she's done?
Yeah, but no, because
she said some other stuff.
The hack itself it said something along the lines of, I'm not African American or black. Yeah. It took me time to find myself, and I have finally done so. To be honest, I am actually dark white. Yeah. Because she apparently has a history of rejecting. Yeah. There was an interview with Oprah, blackness. And basically she was talking about, you know, the African American thing, and she basically doesn't like the whole context of being called an African American. She's not an African American, she's American. It's not an entirely... Yeah, but to totally disregard the fact that you've got any link to Africa, knowing the struggle that the black people have had, you know, and why a lot of black people are in America, I think is madly disrespectful. Well, how long do you... No, you're American, but don't disregard the fact that you're African American. That's like saying an Hispanic American isn't Hispanic. I mean, do you consider yourself African? No. Because I'm ambiguous. I'm an ambiguous race, Oliver. No one knows. About it, you know, for the entire last episode, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Right. Reparations. Carry on. You know, you don't consider yourself African, but I mean, you have links to Africa because your, you know, forefathers presumably would have been taken over as slaves to the Caribbean. Yeah, everyone originates from Africa, though. Yeah, depending on how far you go. Another thing that she said that's kind of foolish is that she's from every continent in Africa. Every continent in Africa? Yeah. I believe that's exactly what she said. Let me double check this. No, that can't be real. That's so she said this. Profoundly dumb. Africa is a continent. Just in case she said this. Listening was unaware. She is from every continent in Africa apart from one. So to me, when someone as foolish as that to say that, when Africa is a continent with a load of countries in it, I can't respect anything that comes out of your mouth.
in my opinion. Like, she's just very misinformed, miseducated, and...
So you think it's wrong for her to...
I think she should be fired from her job. Someone that stupid shouldn't have a job.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, what she just said there was profoundly stupid.
And she also said that I'm also from every continent in Europe except for one.
Which one is she not? Does she mention which one from both Europe and Africa she's excluded?
No. But basically, I think what she's trying to say is that, we're a melting pot of, different races and whatever. Which is, in fairness, is true. We're a melting pot of different cultures and experiences and stuff.
Bad that, people who aren't, say, white American or white British, if they just consider themselves to be sort of American or British or whatever country they happen to be in, and whatever sort of ethnicity, is that not necessarily sort of
it's a good thing.
Sign of integration?
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
But you think at the same time
it's a bit disrespectful.
It's a bit disrespectful.
Plus, she's an idiot.
Even though you yourself do not consider yourself.
I'm not. I'm of Caribbean. I'm of Caribbean descent.
Yeah, only a few hundred years back when.
But how far are we going to go back? Like, that's ridiculous. Like,
well, how far do you want to go back with?
What, with Raven-Symoné?
Are you gonna set an arbitrary date after the end of slavery, at which people will stop calling themselves African American? So we'll go back. It will be acceptable to you.
We'll go back 200 years then.
Okay.
Should we do that? So then she's still technically African American. I chose that date for a good reason. Sorry.
Fair enough. So we've now got your arbitrary personal standard.
200 years back, and that's when you can state where you're from.
It's ridiculous.
How was that ridiculous? You said choose a number. I chose a number.
Yeah, just out of your ass.
200. Fine. I admit I have African links. There's no problem with that. That's what she should accept as well. We have enough load of people hating us as it is. Why are you hating yourself? Why are you hating the fact that you're from, African descent?
Well, she doesn't hate herself for that. I mean, that's you putting words in her mouth.
Stop defending her.
I'm not defending her. What she said was really, really quite stupid.
Okay.
But I don't personally see why that is a major issue if she wants to be referred to as an American.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the way that
does she reject being called black?
I don't know. That would be rather stupid. Well, I suppose she's like mixed race, isn't she?
Well,
and some individuals don't like to be called black if you're mixed race.
What do they prefer? I mean,
well, they're mixed race. They're not one, are they? They're not, one. They're not composed of one race.
Mm.
They've got loads of different influences. They're just mixed race, which is fair. That's the problem with our society, though. We see white and black. We don't see anything in between.
We do, though, don't we? Because there are mixed race people. You're saying there should be more mixed race people.
No, I'm not saying. What I'm trying to say is, like, if you see like a mixed race person walking down the street, and if they look slightly darker, like they had my complexion, first instinct is a lot of individuals would call them black. Look at Barack Obama.
Yeah.
First black president. He's not black. He's mixed race.
This is true. He's only half black.
That's what my point is. Like,
most recent white president, technically as well.
Exactly. So it's the whole. We've got enough of that happening for individuals that are actually, role models to other individuals and are representatives of, multi races. For you to be hating, it's creating a bad image, in my eyes. If that made sense to you.
Yeah.
We don't need to be tearing each other down. We need to be building each other up. Building a great society. And from doing that, we don't need individuals like her coming out with all this stuff.
There was one thing that made her look pretty shabby. She was defending someone from, I think, this company Univision. It said that Michelle Obama looked like a character from Planet of the Apes film. And she was defending him by saying, some people do look a bit like animals.
That's absurd.
So there does seem to be a pattern of sort of outbursts.
Yeah.
You can see why people wonder if she sort of
with it
wants to be deep down a white person.
Maybe she could be the first. She could be a transracial like Rachel Dolezal.
She could be a black to white.
Exactly. Well, we've seen it the other way around. It could happen the other way around as well.
There was another story about that, wasn't there?
Was there?
I believe so. Have you not mentioned it before? A bloke?
Oh no, that was a woman that was like, she was really light skinned. She didn't realise she was. Yeah. It's happened.
I
love how
that.
Is that a different one?
I think so. Yeah. Never mind.
Yeah. Sweet. I think we should end the show based on that.
Yeah, no, it's falling into disarray at this point, so we should, let's cut this turd loose.
Sweet.
I've been Ollie.
And I've been Rich.
And we've been shooting the shit. Goodbye, and see you again somewhere.